Hello, everybody. How are you? My name is Crystal Lynn. I am an astrological magician, and I like to start my week with wonderful people talking about the astrology of the week and how we can make magic with it. And that's where you all come in because you're amazing. So I'm catching up really quickly on the incredible chat you all have going on here. Hi, Amber. Amber, everybody, is our amazing mod. Amber does a fantastic job of helping me keep track of questions and things that you all ask, just in case I skip them in the chat. That way, nobody gets missed because I like for everyone to feel included and seen. It's very important to me. So thank you, Amber, for everything that you do. Good morning to Jenny and Gabe, my new study buddy. Jenny, Gabe is here. Let's see. How are we doing? Have I already caught up? I'm doing a great job, you guys. Rita is here. Awesome. All right. Shauna is here. Kristen is here. Hi, everybody. Amazing. How's everybody doing this week? This week, we have some movements of Venus that we can talk about astrologically. But wow, I was preparing this morning. The reason I'm like out of breath and behind is I've been doing my prep work for next week. And next week is a doozy, y'all. Like, wow, we have a lot going on next week, not the least of which is the lunar eclipse in Pisces. Angela, hello. Christina, it's so good to see you. Hi, Hunter. It's so good to see everybody. Thank you for being here. We are amazing, and I'm so glad you're here. Hooah. Awesome. Erin, good morning to you as well. So fill me in, you guys. How are you all doing? Is there anything that you have on your mind that you're like, hey, I heard this on social media. Can you give me more information on that? Ren, good morning. And with that, we can also talk about how was your new moon over the weekend. It was the last new moon before eclipse season kicks off. So how did it go for you? How was it feeling? How are you feeling? Let me know. And again, if you have any questions, I am here for you. Like I said, transits this week are very Venus heavy, Venus forward, mostly because Venus is coming into the early degrees of a fixed sign, and therefore she is now interacting with all of the other planets that are in early degrees of also fixed and cardinal signs. And so she's coming into a fixed fire sign. She will be coming into Leo. In fact, she's doing that today. And as she does that, she will trine Saturn, who is for now in Aries. Saturn will be getting back into Pisces next week through November. So we'll have our last little chunk of Saturn in Pisces for the next 27 to 30 years starting next week. So for everybody who has Saturn in Pisces, your Saturn return will be capping off and you're almost through it completely. No more stuff after November. So that's pretty fun. All right. So hi, we have another Amber here. Hi, Amber. The new moon really rattled your cage pretty hard. I am sorry to hear that. The new moon was square and an inferior square to Uranus. So surprising things were definitely on the menu, even if you didn't order them. And also the new moon was very close to the fixed star of Regulus, which is a pretty strong energy, right? Like we talk about Regulus as being the sort of kingly lion star. And that is something to point out, that it can bring you attention and all of those things, but it can also maybe shine a spotlight where you don't want that spotlight. So I hope that whatever was revealed or whatever came up really helps in the long run. I hope it becomes a step in a journey that is not yet over until you are victorious. Jade, you need more of a beginner info on astrology. I think we have a podcast episode for beginner astrology stuff. I have a course on it on my website that's out there, but also ask away here and we can sort of turn this into a beginner astrology thing too. Does anybody else want to kind of do some astrology 101 stuff today? Let me know and we can do that. Erin, crying, emotions, relationship check-ins, rough but necessary. You have a great attitude about it, Erin. I hope it gets easier for you soon. A lot of surprises that shouldn't have been a surprise. Definitely illuminated things you didn't want to look at. Yeah, that's stuff. Ren says, my city does our Pride Fest in August. So the new moon, you got to go to the parade. Well, that's fun. I love hearing that. Angela always loves going back to the basics. Shauna suggests joining the student study. Yes, we are really, like, if we did a basic astrology podcast or something like that, we'd be giving you we'd be rattling off really the planets, the signs, the aspects, and like how to try to really quickly pull a chart together. What we get to do in the student study is we are taking it even more one layer at a time, starting with the history of astrology, starting with, where in civilization do we see astrology beginning? How did it grow from there? What are the planets? What are their phases? How do we look at them and understand them? How do we know if they're stronger or weaker? And so you get into the real integration of astrology in the student study. And Shauna, I'm really glad that you like it so much enough to share it. So thank you. There's a podcast beginner episode really early on in Alchemist Inkwell. Yeah. So you definitely could look at that and then go from there. Please feel free to use that. That's fine. If it was an astrology episode, it was probably me going off on it. So hopefully me now would approve of things that me then said. I would hope so. Yeah, Angela is also in the student study. You have a lot of really good company there. We have a fantastic time. I appreciate everyone in that group so much. And a lot of the times they do show up here, which is fantastic. Jenny says it was an interesting week. I got a new pendulum and pulled a random oracle card from a store and got a truth about a situation that I was putting more energy in than was necessary. Wow, that's a little Virgoan. That's pretty funny. I'm glad that you got that clarity. And I'm glad you're leaning into different forms of divination. One of the things, because we're coming into eclipse season, that if you're on my Patreon, even on the free tier, I do a weekly newsletter. One of the things I'm about to start suggesting is lean into more divination skills over the next month or so, since it's not really a good time to be like creating talismans and exerting our will onto things. It's a really good time to be listening. And so listening can come in the form of different divination practices. And you can decide, like, I really like this one, or I want to get stronger at this one, and spend this month getting good at it, feeling more comfortable with it, and leaning into it, so that by the end of the month, you've honed a skill and you can see that progress, and you've taken up the time of the eclipses where it's not as helpful for our typical like manifesting process. Let's see, Kristen, I was working backwards on Inkwell, but they got like a year back and now I'm starting at the beginning and working forward. Yeah, I'm glad those episodes have like a sort of evergreen quality to them. That really is something I value, and I'm really glad that they help. Words like trine and chart stuff, like verbs, I don't know. So trine and aspects and things we can definitely get into. I'm going to finish catching up on the chat, and then I'll start explaining a little bit about buzzwords in astrology that you'll hear often on social media, what they relate to, and maybe where to kind of go from there. The reel on the book, the book we're reading, I don't have it with me because it's at my couch because I'm continuing to read it. In the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom Patreon, if you're in the student study tier, you're on all of the tiers. So that's really helpful. But we also have a book club where sometimes we read more ancient texts. And the reason of that is, building your library, building your sort of repertoire of like, oh yeah, I have read that book. I know where this comes from. I actually can connect these dots. And it's really great. One of the things that I worked on for years alone was I want to be able to read the stuff and know what it all says. There's so many good texts right now. Gabe and I are in a year-long course, I believe, on Agrippa, which is the 3 books of occult philosophy, which is this. You can barely see it, but it's a box set back here, translated by Eric Purdue, written by Agrippa. And it gets into the occult philosophy, which is basically just like, how do we think about things that don't really have scientific explanations? And how do we work with magic? And how does that work with other things? And what's best practice and all that stuff? So I'm doing a lot of reading on that. And in the book club, we get to do more reading along those lines to really have a context for stuff that we're seeing in the world and this framework of education and at least awareness. You don't have to take all of it as gospel. I recommend you don't. But you can go through and say, this is what was thought at this time by this person. That's interesting. I like this. I'm going to start pursuing that a little bit more. And it guides your research and it helps shape your discernment for what you believe, which is going to be very unique. So I always recommend always go with your own gut, lean into the things that feel good for you. And when something feels like maybe I don't want to look into that as much, or maybe I disagree with that, that is as valid as anything else. So we read all these books not only to find things we agree with, but to find things we don't agree with, so we can actually build our trust and our muscles in our own judgment, which is really fun. And then sometimes we also do fiction books, because fiction has as much reference to magic and lore as a lot of other things do. So we have a really good time. And this month we are reading a book that was done by the Bodleian Library Publishing Company. They did an exhibition on different forms of divination and omens and that kind of stuff. And they had a book on the exhibition, which went through a ton of different forms of divination, 3 chapters of which are dedicated to astrology, which makes me happy. And I did a little bit of a snippet on the chapter on Ottoman astrology this weekend from that book. And I will probably do more. It's got a lot of really good gems in it, and really cool things that I had not encountered that thought on this topic before. The authors of this book are, of course, an anthropologist and a historian. And so they are coming at it from an observation sort of perspective, which is really cool, right? Because sometimes we come at it from like, well, I'm an astrologer, so I have this innate defensiveness of needing to be able to believe in astrology. So don't challenge it too much, or don't tell me that there's an outside perspective. And sometimes that outside perspective is helpful. So we're talking about this right now in my Bracharai, which is a folk magic group chat as well. And we're talking about the perspective of Jesus as a folk magic practitioner, and like, how does that shape the way we look at Jesus historically and spiritually? And I recommended another book for us to read in that group. I think it's actually called Jesus the Magician. I have it right back here, which is something in the book club we may get around to reading at some point if everybody wants to. The book club is a democracy. We do vote on it. And so that's really important to me. Cool. Yeah. So I think I've caught up. Wish my head would stop looking for Earth in the chart. Yeah, so in astrology, some astrologies incorporate Earth as a planet in the chart. But Shauna, for this, when you're looking for a chart, charts are a circle, right? When you're looking at the circle, and there's that inner circle where all of the aspects we're about to talk about more kind of run across, that is Earth. So if you want to look for Earth in the chart, it's that middle circle. Because it really is the Earth's perspective of the sky around it. So the circle in the center is Earth. I did a longer video this weekend trying to explain, sort of trying to synthesize tropical astrology with sidereal astrology a little bit. There are some diagrams in that also may help. One actually like shows the different spheres that we're working with. I'm also working on, Gabe, you might relate to this, I'm working on primary directions, which is a lot of math. So I'm going to be taking that very slowly, because math is not my strong suit, but I love astrology. So I will do the math for the sake of the astrology. Okay, so let me just I forget. Hang on a second. Okay. Shauna says, I forget to stop thinking as a solar system, and that the charts are from the perspective of the sky. Yeah. Astrology is geocentric. If we were on Mars, it would be Martial centric. So it's us looking out in many cases. Shauna, that again, it's a 5-minute video. I'm sorry. I tried to keep it short. I just couldn't, but it's on TikTok. So if you want to check out that video, it'll help, because I do show you the solar system perspective and then the geocentric perspective, which has helped me and my brain. And there are images, which is helpful. You also read the PDF on manifesting, and it really paired well with a self-help book on anxiety and activity. Was write out goals. Yeah. Book is called Anxiety Toolkit by Alice Boyd. Jenny, that always lights up my heart to know that things that I'm sharing support some good mental health resources as well. Thank you for sharing that, because it's really important to me. I do have coaching and counseling skills that I incorporate into these things. Also, I'm a control freak, so I've had to cope with my own situations that I hope help with other people. Awesome. Gabe, I am not actually, and all of the margins have me doing the calculations to remind myself later that I've done it, so I can do it again. For anybody who's wondering, I made it to I think algebra 3 and sort of an introduction to trigonometry in school. That's about as far as I got. I have actual brain damage with math. So it used to be really easy for me and then suddenly was not easy anymore. And I didn't know about that until about 2 years ago. But all I have to do is take my time and do it the way I need to do it, and it'll work. And I have support. So I'm really fortunate. And yeah, Gabe, honestly, knowing you and your magic brain that you have, Gabe is one of the most genius people I know, just so everybody knows. I'm sure that you have a really great time with it. And I'd love to hear your perspective sometime. Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, so let's talk about, we'll start with aspects because Jade wants to know about the definition of trine and other things, and I'm aware of that. And Amber adds to that the difference about the term square and minor square. Okay, so this helps guide where I'm going to go with this. Okay, so in astrology, it really is a lot about geometry. Geometry in that we are looking at angles and shapes. I was actually pretty decent in geometry, which is great. But when we're looking, I'm going to show you a chart for this. Can I show you guys a chart? We'll use the chart of like today because we've definitely got some aspects happening. And then we will be able to kind of make sense of things together. Okay, so I will share my screen and hopefully this helps. Yes, visual will help. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I'm going to pull up La Luna. All right, we got Luna. So this is right now. So when we're looking at a chart, again, as I was saying earlier for Shauna, if you're looking for Earth on the chart, these planet symbols, none of them represent Earth, the planet, so to speak, in this tradition. Like I said, there's a what I think is a newer tradition of astrology, as in like the last century or so, and not like millennia, that puts Earth on the chart. It's not one I'm familiar with and feel comfortable being able to explain very well because I haven't studied it in depth. But if you're looking on this chart for the Earth, this is the Earth, the middle, where all the lines are intersecting and going across and all that. This is basically what you can think of as Earth. Because here's my favorite thing. I've done this before, but I'm going to do it again because when I realized this, it was a game changer for me. So I hope that it's always something that really helps things click for people when they're looking at a circular astrology chart like this one. The ascendant here, AC stands for ascendant. The ascendant, we're really going off of the track of the sun from morning to evening. If you go back in history, so many mythologies and different lores follow the sun and make the sun and its course across the sky and beneath the horizon a very big metaphor in their lore. If you think about Ra in Egyptian astrology, you think about Apollo and Helios and like all of these things, there is typically a god of the sun. I have not encountered one yet that doesn't have one, but I don't know everything, so I leave it open there. And so in Babylonian, you've got Shamash. I'm studying Babylonian stuff right now. It's my latest fixation. More on that later because I'm doing a lot with it. So the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right? Because of the way the earth turns. So these are things to keep in mind. Shauna, that's an excellent example. The earth is the pupil of the eye. I love that. So when we are looking at the chart, we're looking at basically like you would a globe, but it's a globe that's been smushed in, okay? And if you think about a globe that has an extra shell around it to represent the firmament or all the stars hanging in the sky, that is very helpful. So this globe is like the terra part of the earth, right? This is the ground, and this is the sky. And so this earth is spinning. And so if I bring out the sun, which is right here, right, and I make this go by a couple hours, we'll see that as we go throughout the day, the sun is going to move across the sky. It's going to culminate and eventually it's going to fall towards the western horizon and then it will set. And as you can see here, the sun is beneath the descendant, which means it has set. So what we're really looking for, I don't know why everything just flashed around like that. We'll update it to now again. The descendant and the ascendant are always exactly opposite each other because they are forming a line of reference for us. This line of reference is the horizon. So if you look outside your window right now, as far as your eye can see, you're going to see the line where the sky meets the earth, your horizon, right? That's going to be blemished maybe by mountains or trees or hills or whatever. But imagining it was a flat thing, when the sun comes up over that, it is sunrise. It goes from the east up over the sky to the west. It sets beneath the horizon and we get nighttime. That is the concept we are looking at here. As the sun, as you can see right now, we're in about the middle of the morning. The sun is going to go across the sky, and the sun will stay in Virgo that entire time. So keep an eye on this guy right here and know that, right, Virgo moves with the sun. The sun does not move into a different sign, even though the sun is moving across the sky. That's because the earth is the one doing the moving. And this out here is actually fixed, right? This is not moving. We're moving. It's a wonky brain trip. But this is just representing the rotation of the earth, which is a day. Okay. So thank you, Amber, for the notes. Yeah. So yeah, I see it's already kind of helping a little bit. Now, when you're looking at a chart, here's the really fun part. When you go out at night, and we'll pop this forward by like 10 hours, that should get us after sunset. Yeah. So the sun is below the descendant. We know this is a nighttime chart. Okay. The moon at the time is going to be near the western horizon as well at this evening, simply because the moon is a new moon. So it's moving away from the sun. It's going towards being full. So we know that if it's around a new moon, you want to look to roughly where the sun was in the sky, and that's where you'll find the moon. It's all relative. Even more so, we know we have our eastern horizon over here. And so if we play a little about Boy Scouts here or Girl Scouts, and you find the east based on where the eastern horizon is, you can then say, and this is kind of a bummer because not many planets are up in the sky right now, but when you find the east, turn exactly the opposite direction toward the west, look up a little bit, and near the moon, there will be a star. And you'll want to do this like before all the stars come out. It's even easier to see. But the star sort of near the moon, just above the western horizon after the sun sets, that's Mars. We know this because it's the western horizon. The sun is below the horizon. The moon is here. If we found the moon and we see that on the chart, the Mars is near the moon, then we know that star in the actual sky when we go out and look at it is Mars. You'll be looking at Mars. And so this is how you can use just a regular astrology chart to help you find stars and planets in the sky without your other app on your phone that has the whole like thing that shows you everything. If you want an app on your phone that does show you everything, that is pretty fun. Stellarium is a great tool. I will put that in the chat here. Stellarium has a phone app, but it also has a computer program. They are both free. I think there's an upgrade version. I use the free version. They're really handy. And so then you can be like, oh, there's Mars, and that's helpful. So that is how you can use a chart to help you find the planets. And that's really what we're looking at, right? It's the sky. It's a map of the sky, and we smushed it from a globe into 2D. How does that feel so far for everybody? Do we have any questions to this point? Is there anything that's not making sense? If not, I'll give it like couple. Okay, I see some hearts. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Yay. Very comprehensive. Yay. Oh, I love hearing that. Great. So now let's get into, I'm going to update it to now again. Actually, I'm going to keep it this way because we've got some good geometric shapes to work with here. No new questions as of this time. Thank you, Amber. So if we are out at night tonight, or at any time, this is the part where we start looking at how are the planets relating to each other. This is going to be aspects. Okay. So aspect, I believe, is actually derived from a word that means conversation. And so, Gabe, correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's like the Greek word aspektos, which was connected to the word of having conversations. And so when we are looking at aspects, we are looking at the angles that these planets have with each other. And we're saying, are they in a helpful, really easy to work with aspect, or are they having some conflicts or tensions? Just like you can have a conversation with someone and it can go really well, or it can go not so great. Same thing with the planets. And there are so many ways that we look into how we're going to interpret a planet. This isn't even going to cover right now if a planet is doing like, if a planet is acting as a good guy or a challenger in a chart baseline, right? We do have the planets that are baseline in and of themselves, good guys or challengers or somewhere in between. And so if you want to keep that in mind, of course, Mars and Saturn, this is Saturn right here, the little like cross with a weird tail coming out of it. And then Mars, the masculine sign over here. These two are your typical malefics. Sometimes one is more malefic than the other in a chart, depending on if you were born during the day or at night. If you were born during the day, Mars is a little bit more ticked off. If you were born at night, Saturn is a little bit more perturbed. You can keep that in mind. This is a concept called sect. We go over it in the student study, but just to give it to you right now, that's how you can look at your chart and be like, oh, Mars is the one that's usually going to be to blame when something goes wrong in my life because I was born during the day. It's not a perfect thing because Saturn still does do Saturnian things, but I've noticed in my chart where I was born at sunset, so we have to try to figure out like, which one is it, day or night chart? Saturn is usually the transit in effect when something chaotic or awful goes on in my life. So I'm like, I'm a night chart because Saturn's always the jerk. But those are some things that you can think about. The two planets that are your stereotypical benefic planets, the good guys, are Jupiter and Venus. Jupiter is like a weirdly wonky number 4, and Venus is the feminine sign. They are your benefics. At night, Venus is slightly more benefic. And then during the day, Jupiter is slightly more benefic, bisect, right? They're both benefic, but malefic equals starts trouble. Yeah, malefic is, and they have their own natures, right? Mars is the more like active trouble. I like to say like you kind of, Mars is the I dare you planet, and Saturn is the I don't think so planet, right? So one will hold you back or put restrictions in your way or weigh you down. That's typically Saturn. Mars will throw the obstacles in your path and try to hinder your progress or rush you or something like that. Again, we have to get into the natures of the planets themselves, which deserve more attention than I can do in 1 hour, but this is the general way to think about them. So yeah, they do start trouble in their own character. If you look at my skits, I will typically try to embody, and Saturn's just always, which is very, very accurate for Saturn, right? Saturn is the looming doom, that energy of heavy hesitance or trepidation is the word I'm looking for there. Yeah, so Shauna, out of sect malefic sounds like a Disney character. Yeah, because malefic and maleficent have the same root, right? So you can think about it that way. Saturn's look is everything in those skits. Saturn never gives me anything else to work with. So there's always an intent behind it, a message behind the look, but it's kind of like Tyra Banks does smizing. I do Saturnizing. Understand what it is through that. It's fun. So those are our planets. The sun and the moon are the luminaries. They let us know, is it day or night? And so during the day, the sun is your light. And at night, in most cases, the moon is your light. And so you look at it that way. We use that for other calculations and interpretations in a chart. This is also sect. Mercury can be one or the other, depending on where Mercury is relative to the sun. That's a whole different thing. We're not going to get into that today because I don't want to be super confusing. In this chart, for reference, Mercury is on the side of the sun because it's a morning planet. It would rise before the sun rises, so it would rise in the morning, and that way we know it's a day planet at this time. Eventually, it won't be, and then it'll turn into a night planet. Saturn does need a nap. I wouldn't mind one myself sometimes. So those are the planets, right? And so they have their characters. They are players on a stage. These are what I would call the verbs of the astrological sentence because they do the moving. Planet actually represents the phrase wandering star. And so they move across the sky as compared to the constellations, which for the most part stay where they are. Now we have precession because of the Earth's wobble, making things go different. But fixed stars are constellations, and they are the stars that hang out where they are. The stars that do moving around are your planets. And so the visible planets are between the sun and Saturn. After that, you need a telescope for Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and anything beyond that, and the asteroids. So keeping that in mind. But let's talk about aspects. If there's a question, feel free to interrupt me. My goal is that this makes sense, not that I get to talk for an hour. The planets wobble, but don't fall down. Well, our planet wobbles and doesn't fall down. And it's a 24,000 year cycle of a wobble, right? We recently had where they were like, the North Star isn't the North Star anymore. I think it was back around 2012. It's because of the wobble moving things, right? Because the Earth is tilted. Not as much as Uranus, but it's tilted. It's on an axis. And that contributes to a lot of what we were talking about between the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac. Yes. So great. I'm blaming Saturn for everything lately. I'm in an Aquarius year, rightly so, an Aquarius rising and a night chart. It is Saturn's fault. And Saturn's going to be doing a lot of moving next week too. Saturn is in Aries and is retrograde. So Saturn's having a rough go of it for his own right? Next week, Saturn will stay retrograde, but get into a sign where maybe it'll be a little less chaotic. We'll see. And I'd be interested to hear how that goes for you, Amber, because that's something that we could definitely keep track of, especially you being very close to Saturn this year. You'll know more than most of us would at the time. Ren has a quick question about natal Saturn retrograde. Does that really mean no success in that area of life until like mid 40s? As that's what I've been told, no success until later in life. I disagree, no success until later in life. I will say retrograde planets in general in a natal chart, because they are moving slowly, because retrograde planets are literally moving backwards, right? So what they're trying to bring about is not, it doesn't have a ton of momentum to it. So I have a retrograde Saturn in my chart, and I associate it with a lot of the false starts that I've had in my life. And so it's this thing that I know I want to do, publishing and writing, right? And I had a traditional publishing deal. The guy sold it to his son who ran the company into the ground. Suddenly I have all my rights back and no publishing deal. So you can see how it doesn't mean lack of success, but it does mean that it's going to culminate potentially later in life. After it comes from, one of the metrics I work off of is, of course, Saturn's return around the age of 27 to 30, depending. And so after that, you might start seeing more success. In my personal case, my Saturn return is when I started working with Emily, and we started helping people with publishing and all that. And I started writing the books that saw more success come. But Saturn in particular, being retrograde and slow, Saturn's already a slow planet. Again, you have to wait 30 years before Saturn comes back around again. It's the slowest moving of the visible planets. And so Saturn does things slowly to begin with. It doesn't mean no success in that area. It just means that things do move a little bit slower because it's a slow planet. There are other areas where you could probably find success. For you, if you want to look in general, guys, at, where can I expect more success? Look at where Jupiter is and how Jupiter is doing. Also look at where Venus is and how Venus is doing. Bonus one, look at the 11th house or even the 5th house, the rulers of those signs, and see how they're doing. That might show you where success is more like low hanging for you. But I had a ton of success as a kid. I was like unanimously voted to meet the president and stuff. So it doesn't mean that you're going to have no success. But again, success in different areas and different focuses and stuff happens at different times. And this is where in astrology, we really want to pay attention to timing techniques. So that's something that we would do in a consultation, or if you happen to know timing techniques, you'd be able to look at that. Jade is asking, how do you know a planet in your natal chart is retrograde? There are a couple ways you can notice. Hold on, my dogs are going nuts. Over a squirrel. 1 second. You're going to get air jail. Be nice. Okay. We just baffled Jack. Okay. So for example, right now you can see a couple planets on this chart are retrograde. This actually shows you multiple ways we can see it too. Some programs will show that planet's degrees in red because it's retrograde, or you'll see a little RX near the planet. So usually it'll be either in red or there will be an R or an RX little subtext with it. Those are ways that you can see. So when you look at your chart, look for a little R or an RX. You can see it down here with Saturn, or sometimes they only do it where the degree is highlighted in red. Jack hates retrogrades. Yeah, he does. Yeah, so so I hope that helps. So in this case, if you want to shout out, if you know the symbols pretty well, there are 3 planets that are retrograde. Feel free to drop in the comments if you want to kind of test yourself, and I'll let you know if we got it. Cool. All right, so back to aspects. We talked about planets, we talked about their general characteristics and how they have their own sort of roles that they're playing, but then they can get along with each other or they can be arguing with each other. The easiest time a planet has with another planet is when they are trine to each other. Trines form a triangle across the entire chart. For example, we can see right now the moon gives us a trine with Pluto, which is in trine with Uranus. You see that blue triangle they form across the chart? This is called a grand trine. So that is one of the things that nodes are, by one of the calculations, nodes are always retrograde. So that's something that always moves backwards. Nodes are their own thing. That's probably not gonna, that's gonna throw off a lot of stuff in this conversation. But yeah, Shauna, fantastic question. Nodes are always retrograde. There's a true node or a mean node. It just depends on the way you're calculating the nodes because they are just a random position in the chart. For everybody who's wondering, this guy is the south node, the little horseshoes. And I'm using mean node, which is going to make them always retrograde. The nodes show us the intersecting plane of the moon and the sun. And I'll show you why this is cool. So bear with me as I do some clicking around because the nodes tell us where eclipses are going to happen. So when the sun and the moon are very close to the nodes, we get eclipses, typically within about 15 degrees of the nodes. And so we get eclipses when that happens. So this is the eclipse that's happening on the 7th of September, not this week, but next week. And we have the sun and the moon in a full moon position close to the nodes. That's a lunar eclipse. And that's how you can eyeball it on a chart and be like, oh, wow, that's an eclipse. Maybe I don't want to do this full moon working that I normally would have done. So very good question, Shauna. If you're calculating by mean nodes specifically, they're always going to be retrograde. So if you're looking at a chart and you have your nodes calculated by mean, you will see a retrograde that then you can compare all the other planets to say, do they look like the nodes do? Then that planet may be retrograde. So really cool tip that you brought up there, Shauna. Thank you. All right, so we'll use this chart to move on. So the trine is really easy to work with. Why? Because the planets that are in trine, or the positions that are in trine in this case, are in the same element. They have a lot in common, right? Air, air, air. We're all air here, or we're all fire, we're all earth, we're all water. They have that in common. There's this mode to them that they work of the same kind of mindset, if you want to put it that way. The next easiest one is going to be called a sextile. And that's going to be represented by a smaller blue line or a little star, as you can see here. In this case, we have Jupiter sextile the sun. And so you just skip a sign over and it's a sextile because they can see each other. If a sign is one off, that's a blind spot. So it's like when you're driving your car and you're looking out your windshield and you have blind spots here and you have blind spots here. Same thing for the planets. So they have blind spots. We call that aversion. And so the sun and Jupiter can see each other a little bit, and they are in a sextile aspect with each other. Sextile aspects will always be, it's either going to be like earth and water or air and fire. These are the feminine elements, earth and water, or the masculine elements, fire and air. So you can think about it that way too. Just some little like correspondences to work with. Cool. So that's your sextile aspect. These typically are considered to create opportunities. Some ancient astrologers disregarded them entirely because they felt that they were too weak to really show up, but they didn't cause anything bad. So you had that going for you. Next, we talk about the square element. Now, here's a good example. This does not make the eclipse too scary. Don't worry. It's just that it's square the angles here, which is being applied here. So it's around like, you know, the later half of the day or the middle of the day. So they are square, the angles. So we have the sun, square the ascendant, square the moon, square the descendant. This is a big box across the chart. It's a 90-degree angle between two planets. When we have a 90-degree angle, can you see clearly and directly? Can you be like, oh, hey, you're right over there, and I can have this conversation with you? No, it creates this aspect of conflict. Right. So we have to take some kind of action to turn the corner. We can't just beeline it. We can't just, kind of curve around and be there or be right with them. So a square will create some kind of conflict where you have to take an action in order to navigate whatever's going on. And so planets that are square to each other typically could be considered to be having a debate, if you want to put it into like a story context. The next aspect here would be the opposition. Planets opposite each other, as we have with the sun and the moon in this chart. They are playing a tug of war. They are creating tension between each other. Some ways to think about this, of course, there's tension. You're at odds. One person's over here, one person's over here. So there's going to have to be like a compromise or some very clear communication. And that's something that may have to come up. But also that tension, if someone's way over there, they're giving you a lot of clarity. Right? You're getting to see from an objective perspective, the full other side of the coin. And so sometimes that creates adversity. Sometimes you're like, I still don't like it. So I'm going to, fight against it. And sometimes you're like, oh, wow, that's what I look like from the back. And that's something that we can work with as well. So those are your major aspects. The only one I didn't mention so far is a conjunction. It's not technically an aspect, but it's when two planets are conjunct each other, when they are together. I always like to say, remember those Super Saiyan merges that you can do? That's a conjunction. The elements of the planet or the natures of the planet combine. Think of Captain Planet, right? So you become the same. So the sun and Mercury together creates a solar Mercury kind of archetype that you'd have to work with then. Those are the aspects in a nutshell. How are we doing with that? I see we've got some other questions that we can work with. All right. Saturn would be setting you up for success when Saturn is in retrograde. Saturn is... it depends on how well Saturn is doing in the chart. It depends on when Saturn is activated in the chart. It depends on if Saturn is supported by other planets. Every chart is so specific and unique. It's hard to be like, well, absolutely for every single person, if Saturn is retrograde, you are being set up for success later in life. But it can mean that. And also, it's a matter of your perspective. How much can you handle, making lemons into lemonade? Sometimes you go through things in life and you're like, wow, that was really hard. But also, if that hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened. And so sometimes your perspective can make it even easier. And people who maybe have like a Saturn retrograde or a lot of squares or things that create adversity in their lives, and they still choose to keep going and keep moving forward and whatever, they have this excellent perspective on things. They make their mess their message. So it's a little bit of what life gives you, and then it's a little bit of what you make of it. Unfortunately, right? Like we have that agency in our lives to decide. Cool. Let's see. I have Saturn in the 10th house. It's squaring my ascendant, but I do have a nicely placed Jupiter and Venus in the 11th and 5th, respectively. Cool. This also totally random nutshell here. Jupiter and Venus are in their joys for you, which is nice for them too. Nice to know I have something to combat Saturn. Yeah, and Saturn is averse from Jupiter and Venus. So Saturn isn't hurting them, and they're not, Saturn definitely isn't hurting them, and they're not affecting Saturn either. But those are nice to be able to work with. That's cool. I would love something like that. Cool. Okay, Rita says, question, in a natal chart, does the planet that is risen over the horizon the most recently have a special significance to that person? Rita, where are you getting these questions? Because they're good ones. They are very good ones. So in some schools of thought in astrology, because astrology has a lot of different philosophies to it, in some schools of thought, let's see, we can work with this. The planet that most recently rose over the horizon has a sort of potency to it because this is the horizon, right? This is the point where life begins. The sun is born there every day. So it's been given a lot of influence and a lot of meaning in the chart. So if you look at your chart and you say, well, who rose the most recently? This planet could be accented. Now, other ways we can also look at this is that planet is in the ascendant. So it is in that part of your life, which is very forward, which is very like in your face. This is the windshield of your personal car, right? So Mars is shotgun. The moon is also, but Mars more so because it's closer to the ascendant. So yes, there are several reasons and several philosophies in astrology that would say that a planet in the ascendant, particularly the one closest to the ascendant that has risen, has an extra sort of energy to it, an extra sort of importance to it. And of course, every time your ascendant is activated, that planet will also be getting some of the energy as well, especially if you're looking at techniques like perfections and even zodiacal releasing. Yes. Okay. Cool. You understood everything but the one-off term. Cool. Well, and now I'm done explaining the things I wanted to explain. If you want to bring up that term again, which again, probably, I'm trying to remember which one it was. If you want, I can go into it in a little bit more detail, just so you feel like, wow, I understood everything on that call. Would be happy to. I spent a lot of my life not understanding things and having people who were not in a space, position, or not willing to help me understand. And so when I finally found ways to figure out how to understand things, it was a massive game changer for me. And I want to pass that on as much as I possibly can. So if I can have someone feel like, wow, I understood everything, everybody deserves to have that feeling. There's nothing in life that should be, I don't understand this and I want to understand it, but I can't because if you want to understand something, I want to be able to help you. Yeah. I am going to try to remember it. It's going to bug me. So, but yeah. So how do we feel about that? That's your crash course on planets and aspects in astrology and how to use the chart to identify what we're actually looking at. I'm so glad that that was helpful. If anybody does have some questions, let me know. I'm happy to go into it more deeply. Yeah, so cool. And if not, I will take the chart down and we can continue our conversation in our final 10 minutes or so. So thank you guys. Brilliant questions. That was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was fun for you guys as well. That's always my goal. Amber, did I miss any questions that were asked? I'm going to take a sip of water here for a sec. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, this is, again, we're looking at like what time it is right now. No, I didn't miss any questions. Fantastic. Not that I'm aware. Cool. If I did miss one, guys, I've got time. Pop it back in. I will address it. I will do my best. Cool. I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. Yay. That was super fun. Thank you, guys. Oh, so who has plans this week? What's going on? What are you guys thinking about? What kind of stuff in magic or in astrology have you heard about lately? Do you have questions about if astrology has something to say about something? I'm here for that kind of stuff. And it's so much easier in this format to do that. Jade, it probably was. Oh, you thought the phrase was one off. No, I was explaining something that I didn't want to. Oh, we have big birds. We have big birds in my yard right now. And the dogs are upset about it. Can you hear the dogs? Because I have this really cool soundproof thing around my microphone, and I don't even know if it works. It'd be really good to know if you can hear how loud it is in here right now. And if you can't, that's phenomenal. You can hear the dogs. Great. I think I wasted my money, but that's all right. Yeah. Jack also projects really well. So, buddy boy, good job. Fortunately, he's also easily distracted. Yeah. Hi. I've got them on both sides of me right now because they also think it's lunchtime. So they're wrong, but it's okay. So cool. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's everything that I was going to cover. So as an overview of the astrology this week, we have today, Venus moves into Leo. And if I look at my transits there, she is not quite there yet, but she's close. Venus will move into Leo today at 12:27 East Coast time. Jack's got a voice for radio. Yeah, he's got a face for TV, though. It's adorable. Even my phone agrees. Yeah, so Venus will move into Leo around 12:30 Eastern time today. So that's around 9:30 a.m. for people on the West Coast. And so she'll be in there, and that means that she's going to start interacting with all of the other planets that are in the early degrees of the signs, which would be Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune, and Pluto. And today, the moon, who is now freshly in Libra. So yeah, hi puppies. They love you guys. Don't worry. You think your AC planet is Saturn. Mine is the moon technically, but if we include outer planets, it's Pluto. Whenever someone looks at my chart, they always kind of go like, ugh, and I have to be like, no, it's cool. I already died. Which is a fun thing to be able to whip out at the beginning of the conversation. Yeah, their voices are heard. They're good at that. Is there anything we need to prepare for the upcoming eclipse season? So this week, I would say do a lot of the, like, if you have any like manifesting or magical things or things that you want to create, talismans you want to make, that kind of stuff, do it this week. We have a moon that is waxing, which is nice. I recommend to that point, since the moon is now in Libra, now this is purely folk magic-y, right? Because I'm not doing like our high level astrological magic stuff with this. But if I go through today through tomorrow, tomorrow night, like around 9:30 Eastern time tomorrow night, we have the moon in Libra, which is pretty decent for doing stuff. Then I would leave the moon alone until August 30th around 10 a.m. because the moon will be in Scorpio. It's not the moon's best place. Then the moon will be in Sagittarius, which works. Capricorn, again, not the moon's best place between September 1st and September 4th. But then you have Aquarius and avoid Pisces starting on September 6th. So I would say get stuff done as much as you can today. And let's see. Today, the 30th, September like 4th through 5th. And then on the 6th, we start resting. My recommendation, and we're going to talk about this more next week because we're moving a little bit ahead of ourselves, which is fine. Astrology can do like really far ahead. So it's great. What I would focus on, what I'm planning on focusing on through eclipse season is getting really good at a divination tool. I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. I've mentioned it a lot today in my recordings and stuff. So I don't know what I've said and what I haven't said. But what divination tool do you really like, or would you like to get better at? And just learn it and practice it for the next month. And that way you're receiving a lot of guidance that's going to help you figure out what you should do after eclipse season when the setting is set for you. The stage is nice and set. And focus on listening and receiving messages and intuitions and those kinds of things. Let's see. I follow you and Emily on most things. I'm grateful for all the resources. Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that we have them there for you. And hopefully we will continue to do that. We've got some fun stuff planned. I'm really excited about it. K-Bin Callie, great, cool name. If you were born with a Libra moon, are things better for you, or can you work with it more when the moon is back in Libra? To my knowledge, if you're born with the moon in a certain sign, when it comes back around, that is the beginning of your personal month. So you can think about that as like, if you're thinking about your own rhythm in life, your month begins when the moon comes back around to roughly the degree it was at in that sign, which happens every month. So it is something that happens every month, and it's like your beginning of the month. It's the first of your month. So you can start really thinking about that. I would start journaling what's going on today, what sign is the moon in, and then relating it to your chart, and start studying what the moon in those signs feels like to you. It's going to be flavored by different transits and things, but it'll give you a really neat rhythm to work with. So starting now, while you have the moon in your first sign, I would start keeping your own lunar journal so that by next month you have a neat baseline to work with, and then you can start working with your own rhythm. That's something I've seen. Kira, I can't remember, it's the last name. She works with health. I think she's Astrology of Health is her handle. And she was one of the first people that I heard that idea from. So to give credit where it's due. Speaking of death in a chart, if we were to look at a previous transit chart for an NDE, what might that look like? Happened years ago, but I'm curious. It's going to look different for everybody because timing techniques and rulerships are very important with that. Again, you can look at a chart and be like, ooh, something's in the 8th house. Somebody's going to die. It doesn't normally mean that. It really doesn't. It can have an effect. It can play into it. It can be a contributing factor when something else is also popping off. For example, and this will be kind of my round out for the conversation. In my own death chart, Kira Sutherland, thank you, Amber. In my own death chart, it was actually a Mercury ruled year, and it was my 11th house year, which is the like good spirit, good things should have been happening. However, Mercury rules my lot of fortune in the 8th, and Mercury is placed in my 7th. So it was activating Mercury. And in the 7th at the time, conjunct my natal Mercury, was a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. I died because Saturn was there, but I lived because Jupiter was there. And several different timing techniques also were culminating around that same time. Even my circumambulations were attributed to planets that were involved. So it is something very specific. It is very hard to anticipate when someone will die, but retroactively, you want to look at your timing techniques. So I looked at all of them, to be perfectly honest with you. And literally on every level, it was like, oh yeah, these sections of the chart and these planets were definitely at play. Even in my solar return for the year, I saw the stuff culminating there. But if I would have looked at that year, I would have said something big's happening, but I wouldn't necessarily have been like, oh, I die. I would have probably been a lot more nervous about the surgery, but I was 10, so I wasn't into astrology yet, and it was great. Sometimes it's better to let life happen, especially in that kind of situation, right? Like I actually have, I think, accidentally found when I'm likely to die next, because this stuff repeats during another even more amplified period of my life. But it's good in my case, and it doesn't hold me back, and I was able to handle it because it actually extends my life more than the doctors gave me. So for me, it's a kind of a unique case because I'm like, oh, this is better. I panic less because I have this. But you really want to be careful with that kind of stuff, right? It's about a mental health thing. In ancient times, an astrologer would have looked at when they believed someone would die. They probably wouldn't have shared that with the person in the consultation, but it was so they didn't overpromise to that person. They would have focused on things that they knew were going to happen while this person was alive, so that person had the agency to do stuff. And then they just probably wouldn't have talked about what happened after that point when they used a length of life technique, which we don't really have good data for right now. So it's not something that we can do by the book necessarily in a lot of cases. And I found mine accidentally both the last time and this time. So if you have an NDE in your chart and you're like, I'd like to look at that, I would look at all your different timing techniques, see which planets were at play, see what that planet rules in your chart, see what signs and houses and other placements are at play, look at the solar return and even the transits for that date, and bring those in. Yeah. So does that help? Yeah. Yeah. Don't terrorize yourself with astrological prediction. Yeah. It is very easy to do. And I very much want to, like, when I'm doing consultations for people, whether it's mediumship, psychic, astrological, I say there are three things. There's really two things that I won't do. I won't tell you when you're going to fall in love because I don't want to spoil that surprise, but I will give you things that you can do to help you and next opportunities where stuff might feel better, that kind of stuff. And I will not tell you when you or someone else is going to die. That's not my business. And I'm not going to, again, terrorize people. I am all about fear-free astrology and fear-free everything. I want to empower you. That is my big thing. Yeah. And Ren, I can tell you're not really worried about it, but it's a one-off thing that you'd heard. Yeah. So for you, again, you have an NDE, you can look back at it and you can study it and see what that's about. I did it for mine, right? I have a Scorpio moon, so I was super curious. But know yourself when you're getting into astrological stuff is what I'm saying. It's very important because you deserve to have a good life. You are here for this life. Enjoy it. And if doing astrology helps you enjoy it because it's exciting, fantastic. If doing astrology makes you feel gloom and doom and makes you feel nervous about things, put the astrology down. There are other things you can do that are also fun. But yeah, Scorpio sun, I see you. Yeah. Typically it's the Scorpio kind of energies that'll be interested in that kind of stuff. And I think it's fascinating. Yeah, but always, 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 as a Scorpio sun too, Scorpio, for as much as it can be fascinated by death and transition and transformation, we also really like empowerment. And so that's where I try to alchemize my energies as well. and this is for everybody as a whole. Ren, whatever your personal situations are, I hope you feel empowered, and I hope it's really fascinating and fun for you. And I hope what I was able to share was helpful and not overwhelming in any sense. It doesn't seem like it was, but I care. So thank you, everybody. This week has been really fascinating. Next week, we're going to get into the eclipse stuff. And I'll get into as much of it as I can in an hour-long thing. To the people in the student study of the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom, you're getting all the details in Sunday's newsletter. And we will probably talk about it this week on our astrology lesson as well. Feel free to remind me about that, and we can look into it. But it is time. I appreciate you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your wonderful questions. I hope you have a fantastic week of this waxing moon. And I'll see you next week where we can dive into the eclipses and things. Thank you again, and see you soon.